a blessing to be here. So this afternoon, we are looking at health is your wealth. Many people everywhere wants we want to be wealthy, but God has given us the best wealth that we could ever have, and that's our health. And so this evening, we will look at how we can not just maintain, but we can also obtain. If we have lost it or lost some of it, we can obtain. All right, so before we go into this presentation, I'll just say another word of prayer. Loving Lord and our Heavenly Father, I thank you for the prayers that has gone up from Sister Renee. And now, Lord, we thank you that the difficulty in the sound has been worked out, and we pray that as we go through this time together, that we will recognize you as our Father that has made us this wonderful machinery, and you stand ready to give us health. And those of us who have lost some of this health, okay, if at any time you're not able to hear me because this phone keeps going back on mute, if you're not able to hear me, just call out to me so I can unmute it. Okay, so health is your wealth. What follows after you swallow? We must understand the philosophy of digestion. Many times, often we eat, and as soon as we're finished eating, if we are with friends or family, we will talk, we'll have a good time, we'll get up and go about our chore, whatever it is that we have to do, forgetting that the food that we just ate is going through a process. And do we know the process that it goes through? God has entrusted us with that information. And so we're sharing that together this evening. What follows after you swallow? Understanding the philosophy of digestion. All right, so there are many things that we ingest. We ingest food, water, juice, drugs, natural remedies. But this afternoon, we are looking specifically at the digestion of food. What is digestion or absorption? It is a process by which a substance changes its form or is broken down to a more simple form of substance for more effective use. The major constituents of food are carbohydrates, fats, and protein. Carbohydrates, fats, and protein. So what are carbohydrates? Carbohydrates are starches that break down to simple sugars and is quickly digested by the body. Fats has to be broken down into fatty acids so it can be absorbed by the body. And this takes a little longer time. So we have the carbohydrates to simple sugars and it's absorbed by the body. The fats as fatty acids and is absorbed by the body, but takes a longer time. Then we have proteins, and proteins have to be broken down into amino acids in order to be absorbed by the body. Proteins take a shorter time than fats, but a longer time than carbohydrates. And its processing time is based on how it is derived. For example, if it's derived from plant-based sources, from plant sources, then we think of beans, peas, it's a relatively short time to digest. However, when we look at animal source of protein, it takes a much longer time to be digested, considering the different components and muscles that goes into a process or has to go through a process of breaking down before it can be digested. And so even at this point, we can see the difference between plant-based, the food that comes from the earth, and the animal sources. When we think of the flesh of the animal, we're thinking of, what are some of the things we are thinking of? Blood, we have muscles, and of course, when you understand the components of a muscle, and the cells, it has to be broken down. And so it's very important that we understand that as the flesh is being broken down in our bodies, the blood is absorbed into our bodies, the blood of the animal, then it carries with us the impurities or toxins that may be in the animal. So it's very important for us to understand that when we are looking at protein sources from animal. Now, this is an interesting fact about plant foods. It's usually a combination of carbohydrates, proteins, and fats. Yet, it takes a relatively shorter time to digest than animal flesh, which consists largely of muscles, blood, and fat. So even the one flesh that constitutes protein, it takes a longer time to break down than the food source, the plant source rather, that is a combination of carbohydrates, proteins, and fats. So it's showing us how the body thanks us when we're using that, which it can break down easily and have a longer time to digest and a longer time to rest after its digestion. So now we're looking at digestive system. Digestion, as we said, is a process by which the food is broken down so that the body can effectively assimilate and absorb it into the body. It includes the working of the salivary glands, esophagus, stomach, liver, gallbladder, pancreas, intestines, the rectum, and the anus. And it consists of 5 systems of processing, which I will refer to as the food laboratory or food labs. So we're going to look at the 5 food labs this afternoon. The 5 food labs are the systems that aid in the process of food from the moment it enters the body until the time they refuse exits the body. So we have the mill, the processor, the refinery. I think I've lost 2 of my processing, but it is the waste disposal. We'll look at that in a short while. All right, so when we look at the mill, that is the mouth. It is a laboratory. The mouth is an oval-shaped part of the skull. And we see that in speaking, the mouth moves. In the same way, when we're eating, the mouth moves. In fact, it is the mandible that moves. It's interesting to know that even though we're eating and it seems that the whole mouth is moving, it's just the mandible that really moves for this chewing motion or speaking motion. All right, so the digestive tract or the esophagus, the food moves from the mouth to the esophagus, but it is important to note that as the food gets in the mouth, the saliva starts to break down this food. So when we were children, we hear, chew your food 32 times. Well, I don't think anyone counts the amount of times. Yes, when we were children, we tried to do that, but didn't last. But the important thing is that we need to chew the food until it is well masticated with the saliva and it is easy to go down. The next time you're eating, take note of how you eat. We eat pretty much like continuous. We're supposed to chew that food until it is masticated well, and then we swallow. Then we take another spoon or another fork of food. But if you notice, most often than not, what we do is while we're chewing and about to swallow, we put another batch of food in, if I may call it that, and we continue to chew. And so it's going down, but we are not chewing and really processing that food effectively in the mouth, which is the mill. Okay, so just think of a mill grinding, whether it is for Jamaicans, maybe sugar cane, what else? Beans, peas, the mill will grind that until it is powder. And that is what we need to do as the food comes into our mouth before it goes to the esophagus. How many times have you tried to swallow and you're kind of like it's too much? And unfortunately, there are times when we might have an upset stomach. And unfortunately, we regurge what we ate. And sadly, in that, we can see that the food was not properly masticated. All right. And that is after it reaches the stomach. So as the food moves through to the stomach, there is now that processing of the stomach that goes on, and we will now move to the stomach. Down the esophagus, it goes as a bolus. The food is now called a bolus, and then it goes into the stomach. And this stomach is a muscular organ located on the left side of the upper abdomen. The stomach receives the food, and then as it goes in the stomach, the enzymes, it secretes those acidic enzymes that digest the food. Sometimes you may find you have GERD or acid reflux because of those strong hydrochloric acid, the acid in the stomach that is breaking down that food, especially when we don't chew well. Sometimes that's the reason why we have acid reflux. The food is saying, not ready for the stomach yet, and the stomach has to do more work. But as the stomach muscles contract periodically, churning the food to enhance digestion, then the sphincter, the pyloric sphincter, is a muscle or a valve that opens to allow food to pass from the stomach to the small intestines. But as I was saying, if there is GERD, if the food is not processed effectively, sometimes that sphincter that is supposed to close, so there's one just before you get in the stomach and one as it's passing through to the small intestines. And so sometimes that sphincter opens. And when you get that GERD, acid indigestion, it's the hydrochloric, those acids, strong acidic matter in the stomach that comes back through. All right, so we're going down, passing the second process to the small intestines. In the small intestines, which is a long continuous tube running from the stomach all the way to the anus, most of the absorption of nutrients and water happens here in the small intestines. The intestines include the small intestines, large intestines, and the rectum. So we're looking first at the small intestines because here is where the absorption through little hair-like projections called villi in the small intestines will now aid in the process of absorbing that food, turning it into blood so that the system can receive it. The small intestines, and sometimes it's called a small bowel, it's about 20 feet long and about an inch in diameter. And as it absorbs most of the nutrient from what we eat, the velvety tissue in the lines of small intestines, it's called the duodenum, the jejunum, and the ileum. And we have the ascending colon. You can see it in the graphics there. And then we have the colon running across and down. We have the descending colon. As the food goes into the small intestines, which is the refinery, this is where, as I said, the process happens. And so it's very important here as the food is moving from the small intestines on, and it goes on to the large intestines or the colon, where it's getting ready to be thrown out as waste. Here in the liver, we have as that chief refinery where it takes in, the liver takes in the food as it's processed, refined, and we have also, which we're not talking much about this evening, but also the kidney, that it will throw off to the kidney those substances as urine which is unnecessary or which is waste. But the liver by far is the most important part of this process, because now it has to store the fat for the time we need it. Sometimes when we get hungry and we said we feel the hunger pangs, but no food is coming. And then after a while, we are not so hungry anymore, because the liver will allow, even through the bile, that it will send its nutrients to the body so that we are able to function. And also it is aiding in the removal of waste from the body. So whatever it is, whether it is food or drugs, anything that goes in the body as waste, or as I said, the medication we take, much of it may be, or even the food may come with other additives, and the liver has no process to get it from the body. It's very important to make sure that our liver is kept in good health. All right, so it says it has many functions. Its main job within the digestive system is to process the nutrients absorbed by the small intestines. The bile from the liver secreted into the small intestines also play an important role in digesting fat and some vitamins. The liver is your body's chemical factory. As I said before, it takes the raw materials absorbed by the intestine and makes all the various chemicals your body needs to function. The liver also detoxifies potentially harmful chemicals. It breaks down and secretes many drugs that can be toxic to your body. The liver makes a digestive juice called bile that helps digest fats and some vitamins. Bile ducts carry bile from your liver to your gallbladder for storage, to the small intestines for use. So let us thank God for our liver and make sure that what we are putting in as we are swallowing, we are taking note of the amount of work that the liver has to go through. And from there, we are moving on to the colon. The colon is known as a large bowel or a small intestine. So we have the large intestines. We have the small intestines, which is a small bowel, and the large intestines, which is a large bowel. It is that organ, a part of the digestive system, or also called a digestive tract in the human body. And this is the group of organs that allow us to use all the food and the fuel that we put in the body as fuel. But the colon now plays a very important role in how our bodies use the food that we eat. The food travels through the body by way of the mouth that we just looked at, chewed by the teeth into smaller pieces, swallowed, and moves into the esophagus, which connects to the stomach. From the stomach, is broken down to liquid and passed on to the small intestines into that liver, and also with the assistance of the pancreas and the gallbladder. And then here, after all the important vitamins and nutrients in the food are absorbed, then what is left over, which is mostly liquid, then moves into the colon. The water is absorbed into the colon, and bacteria in the colon breaks down the remaining material. So many times you hear about the good bacteria, and that, the gut has to have these bacteria. And this is the purpose for that bacteria, to break down the remaining material so that the colon now can move it. The leftover is thrown into the rectum or passes to the rectum by another sphincter muscle. And it's very important to know that before it goes through that sphincter muscle, it is food. Once it passes that sphincter, it's now refuse or stool that we must now pass through the system. And so the colon is looked at as the waste disposal. This rectum is also a storage. As it stores the waste, we know that the muscles is like, the muscles move the waste by the process called peristalsis, even through the small intestine, it's moving through, and then it comes to the colon, where it is passed out through the anus and into the garbage. So as we look at the process of this food, when we eat, how long does this take? So we know that it is not when we rise from the table that this process is complete. And so we must be aware that whatever we're doing after, whatever we ate, is now going through its process. How long does it take for this process to complete? Well, once it goes in the stomach, and depending on whether it's carbohydrates or a combination, if it's plant-based or it's a meat-based diet, then the process will vary. However, the time the food takes to pass from the stomach into the small intestine is about 2 hours. And this is why we are informed or share that if you're taking liquid, it should be before, about 30 minutes before you consume the food. The reason for that is the body has to absorb that liquid before it processes the food that's coming. And then after about 2 hours, it's now passing through the stomach. The process is not complete, but it's passing through the stomach, where the stomach can now receive that liquid, whether it's water or juice that's coming in. Now, what happens if you do not drink water, enough water, and many times we just eat, we're hungry and it's time to eat again. Well, the body needs water so that it can, as it's hydrated, it aids in the process of digestion. To drink water about 20 minutes, half an hour before you eat, as I said, the body now is hydrated and is able to go through the process. What we'll find, many of us experience this, that if we do not have enough water, we start eating, and what happens? We are thirsty. So we reach for the water or for the juice. And for some of us, it's just a part of life. We've learned to have our juice by our food, our water, and so we eat and we drink. But when that happens, the food that is going through its digestion process has to stop, and the stomach will now have to absorb that liquid, and then it continues its process. In a similar manner, if we have eaten and while we are going through the process, let's say an hour after, oh, there is some good cake that I didn't have for dinner, or something, we tend to just want to snack on something, then the processing that is going on in the stomach has to stop to receive that new food that is coming down. And so when that process stops, the digestion process is delayed. And if we are not mindful of this, we eat, as we say, we graze through the day, there's something else, and before we know it, it's maybe lunchtime or dinner time. So we eat a good meal, and unfortunately, the processing of breakfast, or whether it's dinner or lunch, is still going on and has to stop and stop and stop so that you can receive that new food and process. So you can think, if we're going through this process and let's say a meal of flesh that takes a longer time to digest, then we are, and whether it is plant food, plant-based food, doesn't matter what it is, just imagine that there is food just staying in the stomach, and that food is going to be putrefied. It's going to rot because it's there waiting. And we know by the waste removal, we know that food was in the system too long. And so we want to be mindful when we have one meal to allow that meal to go through its process before we take in additional food. Because as I said, they work together. We're not going anywhere. Someone else is coming, something else is coming, let's wait. And so we do damage to our bodies when we eat in this manner. So the human machinery, we are fearfully and wonderfully made. And just consider your vehicle or items in your home, your washing machine, your stove, your refrigerator. You have your nice truck, car. If it's broken down, in fact, if there's a red light that comes on, there's a problem, you reach for the manual. Well, would hope that we'd reach for the manual. Some might just call the manufacturer, but we reach for that manual. Even before we start. It comes with instructions. And so as we read the instructions, we know what we need to do. Do not do this, do this first. And if it breaks, Then my car is Mazda. I'm going to call Mazda. Well, sometimes we have some, we call it shady mechanics. We're not talking about, okay, let me just take it to a mechanic here and there. Sometimes we do that and realize that the vehicle that we had before, the mechanic maybe didn't know what he was doing, and it came back worse than you took it. However, the old principle is the best person to know about that vehicle or that machinery is the one that made it. That's the person that has the manual and can tell you every working. When you look at that vehicle, there are parts that's moving and you don't know what it really does, but you take it to Mazda or Ford or wherever it is that they made it, they know exactly what it is and they know what's going on. Recently, I had to go through the transmission in my truck went. And when I took it to the shop and they took down everything, you were showing me what it is. This is your transmission. We took it apart and I'm saying, okay, but I'm looking at all the parts. I'm like, I don't know what that is, what the rings or pistons are, and he's explaining everything. And I'm saying, well, thanks for explaining, but all I need is, everything to be back in place and the vehicle to be working. This is how we are with our machinery. We often don't know how it works, but if it breaks down, we are going to the doctor. Well, there is a doctor that understands what it is that we need to put in this machinery. So there are types of food that we put in the body that does not profit our bodies, but instead become an hindrance to our health. There are components that we put into our bodies that are classified as foods, which the body does not recognize as food. And unfortunately, some of the plant-derived or plant-based food has been processed down so much that the body does not recognize it as food. It has become synthetic. There are ways in which we eat, even of the food that might be wholesome, that is detrimental to our health. And then there are times, as we said earlier, in which we eat that causes stress on the body and therefore does not provide the benefits intended to be derived. Well, we are not interactive this afternoon, but I always like to share and to ask of everyone, how do you feel? So here is the analogy. There was a little maid that went to work on a farm, and the owner for the farm said, I have a mill, and what I want you to do for me is to churn this milk into butter. And the little maid said, yes, I can do that. And so the farmer puts the milk in, and the little maid starts to churn. The milk churns into butter. The farmer is contented, and the farmer says, oh, here's some more milk. Can you turn this into butter? And she said, yes, I can. And the little maid works and churns that milk into butter. And then it's the end of her day where little maid is supposed to rest. And the farmer says, oh no, I have more milk for you to churn. And little maid is tired, but little maid is a good little maid. And so in comes the milk in the mill, and little maid churns and churns and churns. Master, butter, milk is churned. And the master said, more milk, please, keep churning, keep churning. And sometimes little maid through the night is churning that milk into butter, even as the farmer sleeps. Now, how do you feel? How would you feel if you were that little maid, or you sent that little maid to work with that farmer? How would you feel? Think about it for a moment. So little maid gets no time to rest. As soon as she says, then the farmer says, there's more milk to churn. Well, when we're interactive, I've got the most, received the most interested responses. I can see the faces, and they're saying, oh, that is wickedness. Oh, that's evil. Oh, no, that's a wicked farmer. And so it goes on and on and on. And I'll just stand and listen. Need to be fired from the farm. This farmer needs to be cast away. This little maid it's not getting time to rest, and this is not right. But then when you understand that this little maid is your stomach that's churning away, and we care nothing at all for little maid. So whenever we just feel like eating, we don't consider, well, little maid is doing her work, I can't give her more work. No, we just say, little maid, here's more milk coming down. The milk represents the food that we eat, or the snacks, whatever it is that we're eating, taking no consideration that the stomach needs to rest. As it goes through its process, 4 to 5 hours, as it passes through, the stomach needs that time to rest. So as we continue to put stress on the stomach, the feeling that we get, unfortunately and amazingly, is that we're hungry. But it's because the stomach has had so much work to do and it's not resting. And so it's called an all gone feeling. And when we feel that all gone feeling, oh, I must find something else to eat. But it is really the stomach saying, please, I need to rest. So we'll consider, do I really need to eat? Where am I eating from? Am I eating from my mind or from my stomach? Because it says the stomach, it operates as a brain. And so we want to tell that lower stomach, no more food for you. You have already had the amount of food. You can go through the process. What you need is some water so that the system can be hydrated and the system can go to rest. All right. So as the body, because it is fearfully and wonderfully made, this machinery will always be going, but there's a price we pay for this. And what is the price? It's called disease. Illnesses, diseases, the machinery will function, and it is so faithful to us that it will work itself to death or work itself to sickness. Have you ever heard that term? It says you're working yourself to sickness. This is what our bodies, the stomach, the body does for us, that it will work and work and work until it cannot go anymore. Now, what is disease? Disease is an effort of nature to free the system from conditions that result from a violation of the laws of health. And so when we have a fever or a cold, it is the body saying something is happening here. Even a fever, even though we'll take some medication to bring that fever down because we don't want it to be too elevated, there's too much heat in the body, yet the fever is alerting us that there is a foreign matter in the body and it needs to be addressed. So in case of sickness, there are 4 things that must be considered in order to bring the body back in balance and back to health. Number 1 is that the cause should be ascertained. We need to find out what is causing this. Or what we normally do, oh, I have a headache, I have to run to see my doctor. Not thinking you did not drink water today, or you're a little stressed, or you didn't have enough rest, but we're ascertaining the cause, and then the unhealthful conditions should be changed and the wrong habits corrected. So when we are not treating the body in the way it should, then those habits, the wrong habits, will result in the body crying out and say, help me. And then the third thing we need to do is to assist nature in our effort to expel the impurities. So to assist nature, sometimes we go against nature, because when we go and we put some things in the body that seems like, oh, this is good, but it just sends that to another area of the body. And later on, we have a buildup of toxins because it's not gone anywhere. The best source, as it comes from the maker of the machinery, is nature, nature's remedies. And then lastly, we need to reestablish the right conditions in the system. So as we seek to get rid of that headache, or whether it is high blood pressure, diabetes, whatever it is that the body has now shown us, it's like, knock, 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 there's a problem. The fire alarm goes off, and sometimes what we do, there's no fire, so just switch that thing off, or take out the battery and throw it away. No, we don't do that. We look for the fire because the fire alarm is saying there is smoke or fire. Look for it. This is what the body does when we have diseases, when we have fevers, whatever it is that says, now take care of me. And many times, instead of taking care of the body, we put some more things in the body that the body now gets drugged up and say, okay, now liver has to work a little harder, even so, to expel those toxins that come with what we put in the body. All right, so we talked about the maker and the manual. The maker of the machinery is the best source for information and counsel because that's the person that knows best about how he has made and how he owes the manual. He owns that manual that belongs to that machinery. And if you'll notice, it's in capital H. So the maker of this wonderful machinery, the human body, is our Lord and Savior, our Creator. And he knows best what it is that we need for our body. Consider these words from the wise man Solomon in Proverbs 30 and verse 8. It says, remove far from me vanity and lies. Give me neither poverty nor riches. Feed me with food convenient for me. All right, so the maker of the machinery knows what food is most convenient for the body. But he gave us the taste buds, and the taste buds can become depraved. The taste buds are spoiled even from we were babies or children. The things that we are most accustomed to, those are the things we want to do. And as we come through the years, when we have to make a change, the taste buds say, I don't like that. And too often, or most often, the things that are good for us, don't like it. The bitter herbs, that's good for the purging, no, don't like that. Nice sweets, cakes and pies and cream, give me that, pile it on. And so we are looking this afternoon at the food that is most convenient for us, meaning convenient for the body, that will not put a stress on the body, but will go through a process so that as it goes to the waste disposal, even through the large intestines or the colon to the anus, the food will pass out. Otherwise, even synthetic food will stay in the system, in the colon, and it just rests. It just rests because the body is not able to do its normal process. The plant-based food will help to push that food through the body. However, if that food stays in the colon, it says that it's mostly water, it's liquid, so it comes out as semi-solid pellets. But if it stays there for a while, then the liquid is absorbed by the body. And so when you have constipation, that stool is usually hard. It doesn't have to be hard. Sometimes we have constipation. If the bowel movement is unusually large, then it could mean that there was a buildup of waste that was sitting there. So we want to be mindful from the time we take the food in to the time it passed through the system, that it is food that is convenient for the body. And if it's not so convenient for our taste buds, then we should consider Little Maid. Little Maid needs to churn that milk into butter, and she needs a rest. All right, so what is the required food for the body? Has God given us what this required food that is convenient? Yes, the psalmist tells us in Psalm 104 and verse 14 that God caused the grass to grow for the cattle and herbs for the service of man, that he may bring food forth out of the earth. So it's telling us where this food is coming from, is out of the earth. This is where all the vitamins and the minerals in the soil and the food comes out packed rich with this vitamins and minerals, giving the body the nutrients that it needs. And it's amazing to know that we came from the earth. God made us, every nerve, every muscle, every cell in our body. And the food comes from the earth because food meets with body, the nutrients are there, and the body says, thank you. Now, when we look at the herbs that is for the service of man, we go back to Genesis, where God gave us the very first diet, called it the Eden diet or the original diet. And that is found in Genesis 1 and verse 29. Unfortunately, I didn't have here the reference here, Genesis 1:29. And God said, behold, I have given you every herb bearing seed, which is upon the face of all the earth, and every tree in the which is the fruit of a tree yielding seed, to you it shall be for meat. And so God gave that to us. But of course, we know what happened after the flood, when the vegetation was destroyed, and God added to our diet the herbs. And so the herbs for the service of man. For every ailment, every illness, there is a remedy that God has given us. And it's natural, that we can use. And because these are nature's remedies, it says nature untrammeled will do our work. What it means, if you allow nature to do her work, she will. Often you've been to the doctor and he gives you the cough medicine, and you take it and you feel in your mind, it's like, okay, I got medicine from the doctor. But then if you notice the time it takes for that to pass through the body, and the time when the person who takes a natural remedy to pass through the body, it's just about the same time. We have not really considered that it is nature doing our work, notwithstanding the medicine that might have been received that is synthetic. So as we allow nature to do our work and we assist nature, whether it is in hydrotherapy, whatever it is, that massage, there are different ways that we can assist nature in doing our work. But the most important is that what we are putting in the body to go through its process is natural, so that the body can now assimilate, absorb it, and the blood, as it turns into blood, the blood that courses through the body will now send its life-giving force all throughout the body, and most importantly, to the brain, the place where God speaks to us. And so we look at the importance of the blood being pure, because if the blood is impure, then it is going through the body, coursing through the body, and sending those impurities, which we now go to the doctor. And how does the doctor find out what is happening in our body? Sends us to do a blood work. And so it is so important that the food that we're eating, whatever we're putting in our body, we must know what follows after we swallow, what is going through, what the process is going through, and what in fact is doing to our bodies. There have been times when I take a piece of food to eat and I consider, okay, after you eat this food, long after you eat it, what is going to happen? Well, it's going through its process, and the liver will have to overwork, because I know that this food, either it has additives that is not good for the body, or the food itself is not the best. And so when we are knowledgeable, when we are aware of what happens to the food as it processes through the body, turning into blood, coursing through our bodies, and going to our minds, where God speaks to us, we recognize how important it is for the food to be as the God that wants to speak to us. He's the one that gives us the food that best serve our mind, so that as he speaks to us, we can hear. He says that when he wakes us up in the morning, every morning he wakes us up to hear. He has something to say to us. How often we wake up, we don't hear anything, but we spend our time in devotion. We talk to the Lord, we read the Bible, and we're on our way. Sometimes we don't. But in Isaiah 50 and verse 4, it says, he waken us morning by morning. He waken us to hear as he learned. So he wants to talk to us, but sometimes our mind is so clouded that he's talking to us, but we cannot hear. And often we're saying, Lord, you're not here. And he's like, I am here. You are the one who are not hearing what I'm saying. And so we want to ask of God, because we can't do it for ourselves. Every time we have a presentation talking about the food we eat and how it affects our minds, we know that we cannot do it for ourselves. The body's saying, not going to change. But God says, you can do it through me. because we can do all things through Christ. And understanding in our conclusion here this afternoon that the food that we eat determine who we are. The food that makes the blood, as we talked about, going through the body, delivering its life force. If the blood is pure, then it will be a cleanse to the body. If it is not, then it will impart its impurities to the body, which will result in sickness and disease. We want to make sure that we are keeping this body that is a temple of the living God, so that as he comes to dwell with us, to talk to us, to worship with us, then we can hear. All right, so what is our responsibility? We must take responsibility for our health. No one else is responsible for our health, not the doctor, not our parents, not our children, not our caregiver, but we are responsible. So we need to carefully consider the food we put into our bodies, when we put it in, how often we put it in, and know what follows the swallows. Thank you all for listening. And I turn back over to Sister Renee to take us from this point. All right, can you hear me, Sister Renee? All right. Well, until she comes on, my last point is our health is our wealth. Let's not squander it. Let's take care of it.
Okay, thank you, Marcia, for your presentation. We have a question by in the chat, and it says, what is it that makes foods, meat, in parentheses, unclean?
Well, meat of itself, we in the Bible, the Lord tells us there was clean and unclean meats. After the flood is when the meat diet was introduced. And at that time, the Lord stated what was clean meat and what was unclean. And we can see that in Leviticus chapter 11. So on the broad spectrum, not all meats are unclean. I don't know if there'll be a follow-up question to that, and I want to answer that. So why are we talking about the importance of not eating meat? And it's because knowing the original diet, what was best for us, and then the meat has to go through another process. I won't go through a whole presentation. Maybe we can go through a presentation on that, which is very, very interesting, how God introduced the meat diet and the reason he introduced it. However, we also see that with the impurity of meat these days, the toxins, it is not safe to eat. But in addition to that, we want to follow the Bible counsel. And we know that as well. I'm saying we know that, but because of the way the meat is processed in the body, the toxins in the blood, the diseases, it breaks down the body, and the mind is now not able to hear as God would speak to us. So even though we do not associate the eating with spiritual, hearing the voice of God, it does have an effect. And so also with plant-based diet that may have additives. That is for another presentation, the additives that are in the plant-based diet or plant-derived food that we need to stay away from. All right, so some meats are clean. The Bible gives us the difference between the clean and unclean meat. Hope that answers your question. And if not, you can still reach out. Clean Ministries, 478-303-0344 if you have any additional questions, and we can address these.
Okay,
right.
Are there any other questions? Does anyone else have any other questions?
No, that was very clear. Thanks.
Yes.